Well, let's do this for the pure motivation of leading all limitless Mother and Father, sentient beings to the ultimate. So today we're going to talk about the six parami or paramita. I can't remember the difference between parami and paramita, but I probably, oops. If I ever knew, but anyhow, when we talked last time about Bodhidharma's teaching, he when he was talking about practice, he was talking about freedom from separate notions of a separate self, and then practicing the six parami. And the Buddha said something very similar in the Diamond Sutra, that Buddhahood is attained by freedom from a separate self and by cultivating all kinds of goodness. So the parami is the way that we do that. The six parami are often called the six perfections, but they're not perfections until you have perfected them. So Namdak Rinpoche suggested the name the six strengths in the meantime. And so when they become perfect, they become part of your being and automatic. So when somebody came to the Buddha who had perfected the six parami, he didn't have to try to practice generosity. He didn't have to try to practice patience or diligence or any of those things. It was just automatically part of his being. The rest of us have to put a little effort into doing these things. So hopefully I can explain these well today. We'll give it a try. The first parami is usually translated as generosity, and it is probably easy to misunderstand. When we think of generosity in the West, we think of giving money and or giving something material. But the real meaning behind the word generosity in the parami is, do you enter a situation focused consciously or unconsciously on what's in this for me, or do you enter a situation consciously or unconsciously focused on what can I offer? How can I help? And I was with Namjo Rinpoche once, and we were talking about this, and he said, there's a lot of great happenings in the course of the development of a spiritual practitioner and a bodhisattva and eventually a Buddha. He said, but to him, the greatest day was when you switched from entering all situations with a self-referencing point of view, and you started focusing on what you can offer, what you can do to help, and so on. So he pointed out that generosity can include things like giving money or donating something, but he said frequently it's much different than that. He said frequently the most valuable gift you can give to somebody is to actually listen to them. And when I used to practice medicine, I used to have people tell me very regularly, "You're the first doctor who's ever listened to me." And what happens is when somebody talks, very frequently, whoever is supposed to be listening is sort of half taking it in and half planning what they're going to say when there's a pause in the action. And to actually sit and listen to somebody uh, often brings great relief to that person. You know, people, for whatever reason, sometimes have the need to be heard, and they go through life telling that whatever it is to lots of people, but nobody ever really listens. And then if somebody actually really listens, then some relief comes to them, and they don't have that urgent need um, to be heard anymore. So generosity really should be thought of. What does this being in front of me need right now? Maybe they need a ride. Maybe they need a meal. Maybe they need somebody to listen to them. Um, it's so really what you're doing is you're looking at what the being needs, and then, if possible, helping in that way. Uh, and it's not just about donating sums of money and things like that. Um, any questions about generosity as described that way?
I had a question.
Kurosh has a question.
What if what about wisdom behind generosity? What if a
We're gonna get there.
no, so I was maybe should use a different word. I was just thinking about like what if someone's need, like let's say I run into a drug addict
Yeah,
and their need seems to be their drug.
yeah.
So like how I guess we get to the wisdom, I guess we're saying about
That's the very next topic. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll get there. Yeah. Any other questions about generosity? No. Well, thank you all for listening so far. That's that's very generous of you. So the second parami, um, I looked up a translation of the parami today, and it listed the second one as discipline, but my memory is the second one is so-called morality. Uh, does anybody have a list of the parami today? No, I'm pretty sure the second one can be translated as morality. And I was with Siddhi Rinpoche once, and we were talking about sila, which is usually translated as morality. And he said he really doesn't like to talk about sila in the West because as soon as he mentions it, the shiver goes up everybody's spine from all the guilt that we've been subjected to by Western culture. So um, morality in Buddhism is not a list of things to do and not do. Morality in Buddhism is if you can do something that is helpful to yourself or others, that would be sila or so-called morality. And if you do something that's harmful to yourself or others, that would be the opposite of morality. So when you adopt the first parami as a way of being, and you enter situations to see what you can do to help, the first thing you discover is you don't really know what the most helpful thing is. So Karosh brought up the illustration of you meet a drug addict, and it appears what they need are drugs. What should you do? You know, um, so what happens what should happen in the practice of the parami is that you treat every situation as new and fresh, and you do your best with good intention. And then you learn from that and you refine. So it could be that if you meet a drug addict on the street and they ask for money, it could be that by getting some more drugs and taking them, they could reach rock bottom and begin the path of recovery and ceasing to be a drug addict. It could also be that they would take the drugs and they would overdose and they would die. So we really, when we start off trying to practice generosity, we have a lot of ignorance about what's really helpful. So Namgyal's Rinpoche's statement, and I believe this is an exact quote, is do your best and refine. So-called morality in the parami is really a continuous learning where you try to be helpful, you try to do the right thing, you try to do so-called good, and sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it isn't, and you learn from that. And if you do that with awareness over and over and over and over, gradually you begin to perfect the second parami, and you will much more often do things that help and not do things that are harmful. And when I was first with Namgyal Rinpoche, he was a little more wild than he was in later years, in my estimation. One time we were building a cabin for him in the woods, the log cabin at the Dharma Center at Kinmount, and we had put the roof beams on, and we were nailing the pieces on the roof up to the top. And there was a guy named Larry working at one end and me at the other end. And we were right on the very top of that cabin, about 16 or 18 feet off the ground. And it was wintertime and there was snow on the ground. But underneath the snow, there were pieces of logs and things like that, you know. And the night before we were doing this work, Namgyal had given a talk about how some people, when they experience emptiness, a fear of falling sets in. And he laughed about it, how, you know, if everything is empty, what can fall, you know? But anyhow, he had talked about this fear of falling. So the next day, the Saturday, Larry and I were up on the roof and we were putting the last few boards in. So we were each facing the middle of the cabin, but on the very peak. And we were nailing the boards. And so Namgyal climbed right up there and stood right in front of me, watching me for about 5 minutes while I nailed the boards in. And then he walked along the crest of the roof to the other end where Larry was and stood watching Larry. And Larry was seated right near the edge, you know, so right behind him was about a 16-foot drop to the ground. And Namgyal came up to him and said, aren't you afraid of falling? And Larry, taking it literally in the moment, said, oh no, I don't think so. I have a good grip. And, you know, besides, there's snow on the ground and it would cushion a fall and so on. And whereupon Namgyal put his foot on Larry's chest and pushed him off the roof. And Larry fell to the ground. And as he was rotating in the air on the way to the ground, he looked up and he saw Namgyal's face in this sort of Cheshire cat grin. and he had a realization related to the emptiness fear of falling, that he had absolutely no fear of falling. And so in the middle of his fall, he started laughing like crazy and hit the ground. Of course, didn't hurt himself. So I would recommend that for us, you don't push anybody off a roof until you have the attainment of Namjo Rinpoche, to know that that's somehow going to be beneficial. For most of the rest of us, it's a learning curve, and we will eventually reach the point where uh, we could see the benefit in something like what Namjo Rinpoche did there. But in the meantime, we're better to listen to somebody or buy them a meal or give them a ride or what they need. So we try to help, and then we try to learn what help is best. Are there any questions up to this point? Yeah, Jim.
Well, you haven't used the words, but it sounds an awful lot like Sila means acquiring skillful means.
Well, that's the process of practicing Sila. Sila doesn't mean acquiring skillful means, but the parami is that you start off trying to be helpful without having skillful means, and then you do your best and refine and gradually learn and gradually to become more and more skillful in helping. So the very highly realized beings have great skillful means in helping. It was said about the Buddha that when somebody came to him, he always automatically gave them the very best thing possible for them for what they needed at that moment. And but we have to go through the learning process and try to develop that kind of skill.
That sounds as well like in that case that skillful means is sort of maybe like a combination of Sila and wisdom.
Yeah, we'll get to wisdom in a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the third parami is patience, and in Dharma I always had a great misunderstanding of the word patience, because when I was young, you had to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles every year to get a new license plate, and everybody had to go on pretty much on the same day. And so there were these enormous lines at the DMV, and the same thing when you renewed your driver's license. And to me, the word patience meant being able to stand in that line without getting angry, but in Buddhism, patience doesn't exactly mean that. It means um, uh, uh, being able to tolerate the ups and downs of life without having major negative or positive reactions. And so as you practice generosity and try to be helpful, and as you learn how to be helpful, that tends to settle down your own system, your own being. The cause of the ups and downs are rooted in the various negative and positive actions that we do. And as you practice the parami and you're trying to be helpful. You're not being selfish. You're doing whatever you can. Your own drama settles down. And I've mentioned before one time when I was practicing a lot, this was in the 1990s, I had the experience one day of where the universe became one. And in that realization, there were several facets, and one of which was there's no suffering in the universe that is not connected to me, and there's no suffering in the universe that is not my responsibility. And from that moment on, any little difficulties I had just faded in importance to the point of being, you didn't even have to pay attention to them. There's so much suffering in the universe, and so from that point on, the focus was completely on the suffering of others. And when you focus on the suffering of others and try to help, your own problems just shrink in importance to the point that they don't seem important at all. You know, right now I have moved into a nursing home, and you know, when I'm living in the apartment and people come to visit me, the apartment I was in before, by comparison, my health problems were always worse than whoever came to visit me. But here in the nursing home, it's the other way around. I'm in reasonably good shape compared to a lot of the people that are here. Just a few days ago, there was somebody who was in a sort of a conveyance on wheels that you could push, but they were completely reclined and couldn't really look around, couldn't do anything, and somebody took them out to the patio to give them a little bit of outdoor experience. And compared to that, you know, I'm a spring chicken, I guess is the phrase. I'm definitely a chicken. I don't know about spring, but you know, so your own problems are magnified when you live in a self-referencing mode. In other words, a selfish mode, and every little thing that happens to you seems to be magnified in importance. I remember seeing a video one time, and a teenage girl's father had a heart attack and was carted off by the ambulance. And she had wanted a ride to the mall. And so her response was, why does everything have to happen to me? You know, and she was completely focused on her own little failing to get a ride to the mall, and completely ignoring the fact that her father had just had a heart attack and may die, you know. So by practicing the first two parami, the third parami of patience develops automatically. And one of the reasons it does that is because you're focused on the welfare of others more than on yourself, much more than on yourself. But also you're not doing the negative and harmful things that you might have done in the past. And so your own drama settles down. And through both of those, so-called patience, or the ability to deal with the ups and downs of life without undue formations, happens. And a little bit of equanimity starts to set in. Any questions up to this point?
Yes, I'm interested in like patience sounds, the way you define it sounds a lot like equanimity. So would you say it's like a kind of a precursor to, you know, a
Well,
full-on equanimity?
no, it's not a precursor. It's the development of equanimity.
It is the development of okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it, got it, got it. Okay.
Okay, in the translation that I got, the fourth parami is defined as diligence, which is part of the picture, but uh, it's sometimes translated as effort, sometimes it's translated as energy, and they all relate to the same thing. When you practice the Dharma in the beginning, you have to do it. And to do it, you have to supply energy to do it. You have to make an effort to do it. And so in the beginning, the practice of the fourth parami is effort. As you progress in the development of the parami, and your own dramas settle down, your own life becomes much more smooth, and your own vision of where you're going and what you're doing becomes more clear. Then energy arises, and when energy arises, then less effort is required. So what's required is that one somehow puts effort into the path and developing the parami. But as your energy develops, that effort becomes less and less, and the natural energy is just there. So when the Buddha had perfected this parami, as he had perfected all of them, he could teach all day. He could walk long distances. He could do whatever he needed to do, and it probably didn't take any effort at all. It was just a happening because the energy was there for it. Uh, it's a law of Dharma that when your life is full of drama and highs and lows, that uses up energy. That uses up your energy. And so when somebody has a stressful day, then it's the evening, they will be tired, they will want to get a good sleep. But in practicing the first three paramis, you have eliminated most of the stresses, and you don't have a lot of internal battles going on. You don't have a lot of resistance to whatever is happening, and that frees up energy. So in practicing the first three parami, the fourth parami that can be called effort, energy, or diligence develops naturally, and eventually you can be diligent without really too much effort. And also, interest plays a big part in this too, in that if you sit down and try to meditate and you're doing a practice that you're not naturally interested in, you have to supply more of the energy to do that. But if you sit down to do something that you're naturally really interested in, you don't have to supply much energy to do it. It just sort of happens naturally. it's like a teenager with a video game versus cleaning out the basement. If you have a teenager on a Saturday and you tell them to clean out the basement, all of a sudden they're really tired and they have no energy. But if you tell them to play a video game, well, they can do that all day with no problem and not get tired at all. So all of these things work together and develop naturally. But as you develop the first three parami, and your life and your mind stream become so much more pleasant. The path to happiness is helping others, and you have been following that path in the first three parami. So your own experience of life becomes much more pleasant and much more stable, let's say. And as a result of that, it becomes much more interesting. Wondrous things start to happen to you that maybe you had not ever dreamed of, and things like that. That's a small part of the fourth parami also, is the development of interest. And then any questions up to now before we go to the last two? No. Okay, well, the fifth one is concentration. And concentration, a big factor in the ability to develop concentration is interest. Namja Rinpoche one time told me that it was very easy to develop concentration to the point of absorption in something like a video game or something that you were really interested in. But if you sit down and try to do the same thing with a casino, which you're not naturally interested in, then it's very, very difficult to develop absorption. So based on the effortless state and the state of interest that one reaches with the fourth parami, concentration naturally happens and naturally becomes stronger or deeper, or whatever phrase you want to use. And concentration is really the ability to be with what is without distraction and without arisings. So if you can go out and watch the sunset and just sit there and take it in, that's one thing. But if you go out and watch the sunset and every 30 seconds your mind thinks, oh, I saw a sunset like this, such and such a place, and oh, well, sometimes sunrise is better than sunset, or you know, all kinds of arisings in the mind. That's the opposite of concentration. But if you can just be with what is, and without a lot of arisings, that's so-called concentration. And really, concentration is very closely linked to relaxation. If you can relax into what is, concentration is naturally there. If you want something that isn't available, and then you try to concentrate on something else, that's going to be very difficult. Your so-called concentration will not be very good. And so you all see that? You all understand concentration in this context? Yeah. Any questions up to now before we go to the last one? Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, the Sanskrit word for this is jhana, which is jhana in Pali. Is there any connection between this teaching and the traditional teachings on the stages of jhana?
What's the last part you said?
The traditional teaching on the stages of jhana, you know, for
Yeah. Well, jhana is absorption, and I mentioned absorption that you can you can have absorption fairly easily with something you're interested in. For example, I remember one time when I was young, I was reading a book. I was sitting in an easy chair beside the telephone, and I was so into the book that when the telephone rang, I didn't hear it, and it kept ringing and ringing, and I was very much absorbed into the book. The jhanas are just an extension or a further development of that. You know, there are lots of things in life that people can attain absorption in. The jhanas occur when you attain absorption the traditional teaching for the development of the jhanas, which is very well outlined in the Visuddhimagga, is you could meditate on one of the elements, you could meditate on one of the colors, you could attain some of the lower jhanas through some of the other contemplations. So the jhanas should just be considered a very well developed sense of a very well developed concentration on something related to Dharma, I guess one could say. But I think absorption in daily life would not include anything higher than the first jhana. It would be quite unlikely. So from the first jhana onward, according to the Visuddhimagga, there are specific ways to move from one to the other. So in the first jhana, two of the characteristics that are present is applied thought and sustained thought, meaning that when you put your mind on something, you can apply it to that and you can sustain it so that it doesn't waver and it isn't interrupted by other thoughts and stuff like that. To get to the second jhana, you set aside sustained and applied thought. And to get from the second to the third jhana, the second jhana includes body bliss and mind bliss. And I believe you set aside body bliss. And to get from the third to the fourth, you set aside mind bliss. And you know, and there's specific instructions for getting to each of them. So from the second jhana all the way through to the end of the jhanas, I don't think that occurs very much in absorption in daily life. So it's like a form of very focused, very precise concentration and directed in a certain way. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's
Yes,
what
thank you.
came out of my mouth.
I'm sorry,
Darlene?
the line had broken up, so I couldn't actually hear 3 and 4. Could you repeat 3 and 4, please?
Could I repeat what?
3 and 4, as the line had
Mhm.
broken up. I couldn't hear.
3 and 4 what? Jhanas or parami or what?
Jhanas, sorry.
Oh, well, the third jhana includes either body bliss or mind bliss. I'm pretty sure it's mind bliss. And so to get from the second to the third, you give up body bliss. To get from the third to the fourth, you give up mind bliss.
Okay.
And once you give up mind bliss, then you realize that you are in perfect equanimity in the fourth jhana. And it's also said that you realize that that equanimity was present in the first three jhanas, but not noticeable because of the body bliss and mind bliss. Yeah.
I see. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, the final parami is wisdom. And uh, uh, when your mind is focused in the fifth parami, and you focus on reality, and your mind is not distracted by arisings in your mind, such as desire or aversion or things like that, you tend to see reality more clearly. And seeing reality clearly as it is with focus and concentration, it results in wisdom. Wisdom is seeing reality as it is. And there are many reasons why in ordinary life we don't see reality as it is. We see reality through the colored lenses of our desires, preferences, aversions, conditioning, our memories, our fears. And for example, if you're in a state of fear and you try to look at reality, you really only see the fear. You don't see the reality behind that. So by practicing the first four parami, your mind settles down, you're in a state of equanimity, energy is present, and then you focus your mind, and that focus becomes gradually undisturbed. And therefore, whatever you focus on, you tend to see it quite clearly, and that results in wisdom. Wisdom is not the same as knowledge. Wisdom is more seeing reality as it is, or seeing reality correctly, or seeing reality without distortion, or seeing reality, the reality that is beyond apparent reality. Normally, what we see in normal human life is apparent reality. But the reality behind that is quite different. So through the practice of the six parami, we result in wisdom, and the development of wisdom is absolutely necessary for full enlightenment or Buddhahood. Also, we should mention again that if you practice the first parami, the second parami will develop automatically. And with that, the third parami will develop automatically, and so on. So if you really just focus on generosity or trying to help, all the rest of the parami will develop automatically. Once the parami are developed fully and become perfected, then they essentially become part of your being. There's no longer any self-referencing. You are totally there to help. You're totally there to be helpful and not harmful. Your equanimity becomes perfect. Your energy becomes perfect. Your concentration becomes perfect. And ultimately, your wisdom becomes perfect. So those are the parami. There's also in the Theravada teaching, I believe, 10 parami. And Namgyal Rinpoche said that the 10 parami are sort of a prequel to the 6 parami, that you, if you develop the 10 parami, that will lead to development of the 6 parami. But I don't know very much about the 10 parami. I don't know what the other 4 are.
Well, that was actually going to be my question. So I was going to kind of talk about the difference between the two and maybe bring some of them up, because it's also, it matches these except concentration. So concentration is not in the 10 paramis.
Oh,
And I will just kind of read the other 4. So one is renunciation, and one is truthfulness, and one is resolution, aditana. One is metta, loving kindness,
yeah,
and then upekkha, which is equanimity.
yeah, yeah.
So I kind of felt like everything was embodied actually, but I see what you mean about how this would lead to the
Yeah. Well, certainly to reach the point where you can focus on others as opposed to self-referencing, metta is necessary, and so it's in that way that the 10 parami would lead to the 6 parami. But as I say, I don't know a lot about the 10 parami, and it's helpful to hear them mentioned. And renunciation is also part of moving toward ending self-referencing. That most beings in the universe who are not in a state of renunciation, they're in a state of self-referencing where they want to get lots of what they want and they want to avoid lots of what they don't like. So renunciation would be part of the path leading to being able to really focus on helping others and not so much focus on yourself. One of the things that isn't mentioned in the teaching on the parami, at least as I've received it, is that practicing and developing the parami results in incredible happiness. And nobody warns you. So I remember, what is it, about 12 or 13, no, more than that, 15 years ago, I started having happiness well up from within, not caused by anything. And it was just overwhelming. It was almost unbearable. It was so strong. And so the parami is, by the way, the path of happiness, which nobody mentions. And it's also the path of ending suffering, which is also not mentioned very much in the teaching on the parami as I've received it. Any other questions or comments or anything? Jim?
Could you also say it's the path to, I think it's anatta, the realization of no self?
I think it's the other way around. I think that when there's a strong attachment to self, uh, uh, or to the illusion of self, then real generosity is not possible, because you will consciously or unconsciously be focused on what's best for that self. And so I think that the attachment to the view of self has to be quite weakened before genuine generosity can appear. And of course, um, all of the other parami also tend to weaken or destroy attachment to the notion of self. For example, patience. Um, part of patience is seeing the bigger picture, seeing that every arising is part of a series of arisings, some of which can be, you can put a plus sign in front of, and some of which you can put a minus sign in front of, so that some appear to be positive, some appear to be negative. But part of that is seeing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is a view that to some degree transcends self. If you're only seeing everything about how it affects you, equanimity can't develop. You all know the story of the Chinese man with a horse that illustrates equanimity. Do you all know that story? Yeah. Some of you are shaking your heads, so does that mean I don't have to tell it?
You
It's a
can
great story. Yeah.
go ahead. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so the story is there was a Chinese man living in a village, and he had an incredible horse. And one day, a rich man came through the village and saw the horse and offered him a huge amount of money for the horse. And he turned it down, and because he liked the horse. And so after the rich man had gone, some of the townspeople came and criticized him. You could have been set for life with all that money. Yeah, it's a nice horse, but you really made a big mistake in passing up all that money. And he said, well, that was just one event in the sequence of things. We don't know how it's going to turn out yet. And so sometime later, he had a little corral outside his house where he kept the horse. And one day he got up and went out, and the horse had jumped the fence and was gone. And so some of the townspeople came and criticized him even more. You could have sold the horse and had all that money. Now you don't even have the horse. The horse is gone and you didn't get any of the money. This is a terrible event. And he said, well, it's just one thing that happened. Let's wait and see how it turns out, And so sometime later, his wild horse came back. His horse came back and brought with him a whole bunch of wild horses. And so he ran out and opened the gate of the corral, and his horse ran in, followed by all the other horses, and then he closed the gate. And so all the townspeople came and said, oh, you're the luckiest man alive. Not only did your horse come back, and it's a wonderful horse, but now you have all these other horses, and you'll probably wind up being rich from this. And he said, well, it's one thing that happened, and and he again expressed another view not getting too excited by a good event or a bad event. And but the townspeople ignored him because they knew this was a really good thing that had happened to him. So then the man had one son, and in the Chinese culture, you rely on your son to look after you when you're old. And so he and his son were breaking in the wild horses by getting on them and riding them a little bit in the corral. And one day, the son fell off the horse. He was trying to break in and broke his leg, and it was a very bad break. And so the townspeople all came and said, "Oh, this is such a horrible event for you. Now you'll have nobody to look after you when you're old." And he said, "Well, yes, it's a horrible event. It would be better if my son was well, but you know, it happened." And so then sometime later, an army came through town, and they took all of the young men in the town to join the army, and it was quite likely that none of them would come back alive. And so all the townspeople were devastated, but they didn't take the man with the horse's son because he had a broken leg and couldn't serve in the army. So all of the townspeople came and said, "Oh, you're so lucky. Your son can't walk normally, but he can walk a little bit with a limp, and he'll be there to take care of you when you're old. We have lost all of our sons. There'll be nobody to take care of us when we're old." And and so it went on that the townspeople kept coming with all the ups and downs and all of the judgments about what's good and what's bad. And the man finally said, I guess you'll never understand, you know, that these are just events in a sequence of events." And so the man who had the horse had great equanimity. He was not moved much by the ups and downs of all the events that happened. But the townspeople didn't have equanimity and reacted strongly to all the ups and all the downs. So I don't know that the story has any end, but he had lots of horses, and he had a son with a limp, and you know, yeah. Okay, any last comments or questions before we wrap up?
I had a little story come up in my mind regarding Virya that I thought might be fun to share. I read from a Theravada monk. I think it was Lady Sayadaw that we talked about yesterday. I think he was mentioning this story that the Buddha said about how if there was a turtle in all of the oceans of the world, just one turtle that would come up to the surface for air once every 100 years. And if you were randomly somewhere in the ocean in a boat, and you had a little like a circle, a loop, and then you just threw this loop randomly into the ocean, and it so happened that this loop would fall on that turtle that is coming up every 100 years. The odds of that happening is more than the odds of you being born as a human. As a point of saying that how valuable it is to have a human life.
Yeah.
And how practicing that fourth jhana really requires being born in this realm.
Yeah.
Kind of pointing that out. So then Lady Sayadaw would say, that's how you should think about it. You shouldn't really think about development on the path. You shouldn't leave it for your future lives. You should understand how valuable your life is and try to aim for it in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Because that will help you develop the virya that is needed.
Yeah.
Virya was one of the paramitas, that's why I think.
Yeah. Well, good. So it's a precious human life. which we also talk about quite regularly. So I guess that's it for now, and then we're not going to reconvene until August. Is that correct?
Yeah, the next meeting will be August 7th. So no classes in July.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm sure you'll all attain Buddhahood between now and then, and so you can teach us, teach the rest of us. But thank you all for coming. Let's dedicate any merit up to now and from all sources and times to all beings that each without exception attain the ultimate for themselves.